wanted just to spend a few minutes just here at the end of the meal, just to tell you a little bit of Shelly's story, at least from my perspective, and actually in 3 parts. So we're going to record this and hopefully be able to post each part on YouTube. So the next 2 nights, if you want to hear the rest of the story, the next 2 Saturday nights, you can check on YouTube and hear the rest of the story. Yeah, the rest of the story, yes. So, just kind of the way it started out, Shelly was one of those kids that always wanted to do artwork constantly. One of the things I turned the house for upside down and never did find was when she was little. She played in the driveway like little girls will, but she got all the little pebbles in the driveway and she glued them together. We found them 3 years ago. I took pictures of them. Haven't seen them since, so I'm not sure where they are, but there's a little cute giraffe with all the pebbles in the driveway stacked up to make its long neck, and she carefully put a face with a smile on on its head and all that. Just anything she could get her hands on that'd be creative, she was just one of those kids. And so anyway, she apparently always dreamed of being a children's book illustrator. And I didn't really know until, as we were preparing for this show, just actually, just within the last month, I opened an envelope and I was looking through old totes of stuff that we got from her folks. There was a envelope that had 4 children's books in it, written and illustrated by Shelly Rasche. One of them was 1969, copyright Shelly Rasche, that she wrote on there carefully in pencil. They're bound with construction paper on the top and the bottom, and anyway, so there's 4 of those. I thought it'd be really neat to somehow share those with our kids, and so and later in our married life, I wrote some children's stories and she illustrated them. So anyway, I strung together 6 children's stories, 3 of the 4 that I found recently, and 3 that we did back in or adult life. And so that's, if you happen to see out there, there's a book that has as a compilation of children's stories in it. So I noticed that I bought, I think, 10 extra ones I called it the economy version. They were just the cheapest I could get from paperback and all from Shutterfly. So those apparently almost sold out today. So if there's anybody else that wants one, we'll do a waiting list, but if you want to see some of the stories. But on our very first date, I called it a date, she won't call it a date, at Illinois Wesleyan. She was a senior, I was just a freshman. And I convinced her to go on a walk, so we went on this walk around the campus, Illinois Wesleyan, got some ice cream and all. And she confided that she wanted to illustrate children's books. So I told her I always wanted to be a writer, so maybe someday we could do that together. So it was kind of like a little shared dream. And anyway, she ended up graduating and going on, so for the next 3 years I dated the rest of the girls at Illinois Wesleyan. And then we got back, met each other again shortly before college, and had our romance for about a year, got engaged and got married, and went off to Dallas, Texas, where I was in seminary for 3 years, and she was trying to basically support me, and there was, wasn't her kind of, art or work. She was working in a bookstore and all that kind of stuff. So then we finished seminary, moved to the First Church down at Pleasant Hill, and in the parsonage, she brought up the dream again. She wondered, she always wanted to write children's books, but didn't know how to go about it. And I'll never forget her sitting there looking up at me, the big mouth, and she said, "Will you be my manager?" And I said sure, but I didn't really know what that meant or how to do it. So we had Ben at the time, and he had children's books. So I went and got one of the children's books, and this is before the internet or anything like that. So I noticed that one book was written by Harper and Row in New York City. So I picked up the phone and called director assistants and got to Harper and Row, and they got me to the art department, and we were lucky that we got someone in the art department that actually would talk. When I said, how do you become a children's book illustrator? So I'm sure they were busy, you know. And they said, you have to get a portfolio of your artwork together and then come to New York City and show the portfolio, and we'll look at it and let you know if it'll work for us. Well, so we ended up, they said you could illustrate nursery rhymes. So if you remember in there what the portfolio is, there's Little Bo Peep and you know, those kind of nursery rhymes. Humpty Dumpty, pictured before his great fall, and all that was the kind of things that were illustrated to kind of give a feel for how she would do it. So we went with great hopes. We got the cheapest flight we could get to New York City, parked Ben with his grandparents for 4 days, and sorry Ben, okay, but they had a good time and they did too, and got the cheapest hotel we could, which is a mistake. It had no lock on the door, and there were people screaming and fighting with each other in the hallway that night. We were terrified. We piled furniture against the door, I remember. And anyway, we ended up, we made it, but it was an unusual experience. And so in 4 days, we went to 13 publishers, and they wouldn't even set an appointment until you were in the city. So I remember we took a roll of quarters. We had a list by then of all the children's book publishers in New York, which there's a lot of them. That's really where they all are. So we got 13 appointments in 4 days, and every one of them was a rejection. So we went to, a lot of times we'd be sitting in the lobby, and the person would just come out in the lobby, they'd grab the portfolio, open a page, open a page, open a page, shut it, and then, you know, this isn't for us. And before the appointment time even started, we were done. But we got it. We luckily ran into a couple of them that took the time to explain that the problem with hiring an unknown for a children's book is that the company's going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and spend 6 months to maybe a year developing a children's book, and that's a lot to risk on an artist that you know nothing about. You don't know if they'll even sell, you know, their work. So it turns out that publishers don't exist just to publish a story because you think it's a cute story. They apparently want to make money. Isn't that weird? So we learned that how do you get started then if you don't have experience but they only work with experienced people? And so they said you should try children's magazines, because children's magazines have a set group of subscribers. They have a monthly deadline, lots of pages to fill. They're interested in doing it as cheaply as they can. And even if the artwork on page 63 is terrible, it doesn't matter because they still have the same subscribers next month. So it sounded like it would be easy. So the first thing we did is we got back, we looked up children's publishers. There's ones like Cricket Magazine up around Chicago. We went we went around to several places. I actually have an itinerary. We went to Nashville and St. Louis and Kansas City and Chicago, and we made a whole round, meeting with as many as we could in person. We found out a little too late that a lot of them it would be okay if you mailed color slides instead of going in person. So we ended up also getting told there's a book called The Artist Market that comes out every year. It's thick, where all the different places that use freelance artists every year submit information about who you should mail something to and what they're interested in seeing and when you should send it and the address and all those details. And so it was their way of trying to get all the freelancers out there to send them things that are helpful instead of a lot of things that are unhelpful. So we started sending color slides. And so she'd finish a piece and we'd go outside and I'd stand on the picnic table so that I could be right above it and straight down on it in the full sun and I'd take 10 pictures of each one. So we would end up with 10 sets because with the color slide, you just get the one. So we'd end up with 10 sets, and then eventually she'd start working on the next set. So meanwhile, we put a set together that was, say, good, we thought, for children's magazines, and along the way we heard that greeting cards were also easier to get into for beginners. So we picked out all the greeting card companies that seemed possible, and I had lists of all these. We still kept sending to children's book companies, but it was a big effort. And so when sometimes we'd send as many as 40 packets out in a week of all these color slides in, and you had to always send a self-addressed stamped envelope. And they usually take them a month to 3 months to even reply to you, and then you get the envelope back with a rejection letter. And so this went on, and I believed in, I called it keeping hope alive, which was every time we got rejections in the mail, we'd get them in the morning, and I would have envelopes ready to put those slides in and send them to the next one on the list. Because I dreaded the thought that everything would come back rejected, and all of a sudden we'd be at a place, well, okay, we're done. I always wanted to have the feeling that every time we went to the mailbox, there was still hope that someone would accept. But it got hard over 2 years. It took 2 years of doing this, and all these, and you saw, if you wanted to, that there's that, I call it the wall of rejection in there. And that's just a few of them. I have a whole file drawer still full of all these companies that only did rejections. I didn't accept the first rejection. We'd listen to what they said, and sometimes maybe it's timing, so you send them stuff for Christmas at Christmas time, but maybe they didn't want it until July, or maybe 18 months later. So sometimes just pure timing. They don't have the time to explain to everybody, hey, if you would sent this 6 months later, we might have gone with this one. They just send it back. That's not what they're looking for. They just put it in the return and send it. So it was interesting, and there were a few of them that were more positive. One of the companies we sent to was a greeting card company named Sangamon that was in Taylorville, Illinois. And at the time was the 4th biggest greeting card company in the United States. Of course, there's Hallmark and Gibson, and so it was a company that would put out big racks of greeting cards, 1,000 of them in grocery stores and that sort of thing. They were competing with Hallmark. And so they needed a lot of artwork, and luckily they were just in Taylorville. So when we visited parents in Decatur, we could just hop down there and see them. So, and they were friendly. They would bring us up to the art department and sit down and look through stuff and ooh and ah over it, but not buy anything. And finally, on our 5-year wedding anniversary, we decided to make a trip to St. Louis, and said, let's just go ahead and stop by Sangamon one more time. So we stopped by Sangamon, and they didn't even let us upstairs this time. They made us sit in the lobby. But the guy took the portfolio. Ron Nussbaum was his name, the art director. And we went and waited, and after a little while he came back and he goes, just calmly, like matter of fact, like he did this every day, which I suppose he did. He just goes, we'll take this one. And we just tried to act real cool, because that'd been 2 years, and it was on our 5-year wedding anniversary, which is really neat, on the way down to St. Louis to celebrate. So, he told us what they'd give for it. He kept the artwork, and that was it. And so if you're in there, it's the little teddy bear playing his xylophone. Who knew? Could have started with that sooner, but but that's what they wanted at the right time. So it was a big celebration, and the question is, what do you do after that? I mean, it was going to be several months before it came out. I thought, well, great, maybe they'll start buying stuff. Well, we kept sending things, of course, to Sangamon, and they kept getting rejected. So for 4 more straight months, pure rejections, even from Sangamon and everybody else. Finally, they bought 1 more, and then 2 more months of pure rejections, and then all of a sudden they bought 6. And I thought, oh boy, this is good. We're heading the right direction. And then after a little while, a place over in Seymour, Indiana, Dixon's, they are one of the biggest suppliers of religious merchandise in Christian bookstores. So they were close enough in Seymour, Indiana to go visit. And so we sent them a letter, and afterwards said, is it okay if we come by? And they said, sure. So after the first of the year in '88, we stopped by to see them. And then about another month went by, and all of a sudden in the mail came actually an assignment from them. And there were 7 different items they wanted Shelly to develop just right off the bat. And they still buy things from Shelly now. But just to give you I don't want to talk finances too much, but just to give you an idea, at that time, they would buy a piece of artwork and keep it and pay maybe $75 or $100 for the piece of artwork. Skipping ahead, later after we had an agent, all of a sudden they would pay closer to $375 advance against the royalty, and we got to keep the artwork. So all they were doing is using the artwork but not insisting on owning it and keeping it. And that's a big difference. So all the way until there was an agent, all those companies just kept the artwork, and I don't know where it is. It's gone. They bought it for relatively cheap prices. But as far as, even though it's fun to have a greeting card, you know, you had about enough to go maybe get groceries for that day. And the weird thing was, of course, we learned pretty fast that if you're a freelancer, even if you sell something, the next day you're back to being unemployed again. So the marketing is all important to continue all along. I heard one person say the worst thing you can do if you're in marketing is have a success, because that'll stop a lot of people. They'll say, well, I met my goal, I got my book published or my article published or whatever, and then they're done. When in reality, it's just the beginning, a building block, and you keep going. And I noticed that, like with Dixon's, we sent them 3 greeting cards that had already been published. So that kind of gave some credibility, like, you know, and so you can build on that, but not until so you don't stop market harder. So meanwhile, we were, Pleasant Hill's not too far from St. Louis. We used to go to St. Louis to Union Station, and Mary Engelbright had a store down there. She was about 10 years or so ahead of us, and she had a big, she did all her beautiful designs and all that, so Shelly always really admired Mary Engelbright. And we would talk to them in the store, and they'd say, oh yeah, you just missed Mary, she was in here this morning, and all that, the employees at the store. And so we'd say, oh gosh, it'd be neat, and we'd show them, you know, when Shelly got a card done, we'd show them, and so they'd say, oh yeah, sorry you missed Mary and all that. Well, one day we heard that Mary was willing to actually meet with Shelly. So we got invited to go to her studio and to talk to her about what was actually, you know, Shelly was doing and all that. And she gave an important piece of advice then. She said, you know, even though you're having some success selling designs, she said, when it's all said and done, you're going to spend all the money, you're going to lose all your artwork, and nobody's looking out for your interest as an artist. You know, she said you need to stop selling it, which I was sort of, and she said you need to get an agent, and you also need to go to the every year go to the New York Stationery Show. So back to New York again was what she was advising. The New York Stationery Show, all the artists, editors in the world practically all converge on New York City once a year, and look at each other's products that they're going to put out. Plus you get to see what all these different stores are going to be doing the next year, way in advance of when it ever gets to the store. Because what people are buying there isn't going to show up till 6 months to a year later actually in a retail store. So it was interesting to go do that. Of course, you're hobnobbing with a lot of people that are interested in the same things. So anyway, we did all that, and we started going to the New York Stationery Show, and we finally met one day an individual named Stan Cohen. It turns out he was a licensing agent. We didn't even realize it at the time. And so he said he was really interested in Shelly's work. He turned to his wife. They were just a family operation. And Marilyn wasn't so sure. She goes, I don't know, I think we're busy enough and all that. And Stan said, no, this is really, I've got a good feeling about this. I think we should do this. And they're having this discussion right in front of us standing there. And so anyway, he said, we'll send you some information. So we came home from New York and got some information. They were interested in doing a contract to be an agent for Shelly. So that was exciting, and we contacted Mary Englebright and said, what do you know about these people? What do you think? And it turns out they're the same company that started off representing Mary Englebright. And that they were really good people, but Mary's husband decided to quit his job and do full-time working for Mary, so they didn't need an agency, they just did it themselves. But so anyway, good recommendation, so we signed up with them. They started representing Shelly's work, which more or less left me without my manager job anymore. They were the ones going out and trying to sell Shelly's work, and of course they're keeping a healthy share of what they could make, but they could make a lot more. And also had a lot more contacts, a lot more opportunities. So it was an interesting step. Unfortunately, after about a year or so, Stan developed cancer, and it wasn't too long after that, it was an aggressive form, and he passed away. And he was really in the family, he was really the front person that made friends and did all that. So what happened was we ended up switching to a different agency. The Cohens are still good friends of ours, and they still represent all the pieces that Shelly did up until that time. And every once in a while, they still sell more, but for the most part, we're with a different company now. It's called Art Licensing, and that's about where I just wanted to kind of bring you through that first part of the story. One more little tidbit in that is I remember once when we went to New York, Shelly was expecting Zachary, and it was far enough along that I remember carrying the portfolio in our suitcase, and we were at Grand Central Station. We got way out in the middle of the floor, Grand Central Station. All of a sudden, Shelly just got busy and weak, and I remember, we'd been traveling, and it was just tiring, and she was expecting. And she ended up having to just lay down on the floor, and I'm in the middle of Grand Central Station with our luggage, and Shelly on the floor and looking around, and we don't know anybody. Just felt so lost. And New York City's a different sort of place than Pleasant Hill. So we eventually, she got to feeling better, and we carried on. But so we've had there were lots of really interesting experiences and moments along the way like that. But I just wanted to share that first victory that I just thought we went out after Ron Nussbaum bought that first card. We, like I said, tried to act real cool. Then we went out in the parking lot and gave a whoop and a high five. And we had a wonderful 5th anniversary, But it was. I feel like it's been a privilege for me to be able to witness all that she's done in terms of her creativity. And there's been a couple times as a pastor I've heard from people that one spouse or the other just wasn't supportive of what was in the bones of their spouse, and how important it is, I think, to really pay attention to the person you love and see what they want to do, and how something may seem unlikely, and if you fail, we have lots of failures, lots of rejections, but also if you have a victory along the way, it's good. Whether you have a rejection letter or an acceptance letter, you do it together and you share it, and that's, I think, one of the things that just makes life and our relationship really a blessing, and something really important. And that can be true no matter what it is. On a small scale, you hope to get the lawn mowed before the weekend relatives come, or whatever it is. If you can do it together and share in it, then you shared part of life, and it's a joy. I feel that it wasn't a get-rich-quick strategy to do art. And there were lots of times I remember when sometimes we get a rejection letter, we We used to go on dates every Thursday night. Sometimes they'd come in on Thursday, and Shelly'd feel discouraged. And I remember driving from Pleasant Hill to Quincy, because Quincy was our date destination most of the time. So we had about an hour to talk. And I remember several times her asking, "Do you think I should just quit and get a job that will pay some money?" I knew how much she wanted to do art. And I remember at least one time telling her, you know, there's a lot of people in the country that started wanting to be a freelance artist the same day that we started. And today they've been at it a whole year with pure rejections too. And they feel just as discouraged as we feel. Today's the day, let them quit if they want to quit. Just be stubborn enough to outlast them. We'll start tomorrow and keep going. And I think you have to be just really stubborn and patient, you know, and persistent, and keep learning along the way. Don't expect the world to change to just because you have to figure out what they want and how you fit into their plan. And then after time, I think it seemed like it worked out, at least in the case. I know there was a lot of luck and blessings and good things happened along the way. The day we went down the aisle where we met Stan and Marilyn Cohen, we were almost ready to leave. In St. Louis, the Jacob Javits Center, if you've ever been there, it's a gigantic place. Oh, it's huge. We were tired, lots of rejections there too. And we were almost ready to go home. And I remember saying, I don't think we've been down this aisle yet. Let's just go down this one aisle. And we caught Stan and Marilyn Cohen packing up, ready to go home. And we were really lucky that we found them. But I don't know if that's luck or if it's just that if you just keep banging your head against the wall, every once in a while the wall cracks. But it was, I do want to say that it's just been a joy to be part of this, and the fact that you're all here means a lot to us. I can look around this room and see so many people that have been part of our lives in all sorts of ways through the years, and I hope for all of you that you count your blessings in people that have blessed you and been part of your life. It's the best thing out there, worth way more than anything else, and especially the ones you love and that are close to you. Just never take it for granted. We don't know. We've been blessed with almost 41 years together, and I know that's a real blessing. I cherish it all. Thank you for coming and listening to me just kind of reminisce a little bit. It's meant a lot that you're here. So thank you, and feel free to resume whatever conversation that you want to have, and I'll hang around here too. If you ask me a question, you might get a long answer, so be careful. We'll be around. Thank you.